Hey, welcome back. My name is Paul Fritz, and this is Putting on the Fritz 3D Visualization. So, in this video, we're going to go ahead and get our player moving. Last time, we got the player set up, we put some texture on the player, we did our inputs into our game so that we can use them to get our player moving. And we'll talk about that as we start to do the blueprints. If you've missed out and this is your first time joining us, you can always catch me on Putting on the Fritz 3D Visualization. It's my YouTube channel, and I have a lot of content on there for game making, 3D modeling with Maya, and animation, a few other things. So check it out, and hopefully I'll see you again, and subscribe if you like it. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on into making the player work. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my content drawer. If you closed out your player, remember content drawer, content, we put them in our blueprints, pawns, and there is our player. So if we double click on it again, now it's going to open up. This is what we did last time. We got the player, the spring arm, and the camera all set up. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into this tab up here called Event Graph, okay? And in the Event Graph, we're going to go ahead and get started with a few things, okay? The first thing is getting our player to move, okay? Forward and backwards. So what we want is, let me see, do we want to do mouse for, it doesn't really matter. We'll do forward and backwards, and we'll also set up our mouse control at the same time as well as stopping. So I think I'm going to start at the top and go with our mouse. Now, there's these functions in here already. Some people, when they do their videos, just like to delete these things, get rid of them. It just saves me time if I don't have to go back and find them again. So I just move off to the right and leave them there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to set up my mouse, okay? Now, remember in our inputs, we created one. We right-click, and we're going to type in that name, and it's going to be mouse, what do I call it? Mouse left-right. Okay, so mouse left-right, and we want an axis event right here, okay? You can see there's a function that was created by that as well, but what we want is this one right here, the mouse one. It should be red with a little arrow pointing in, okay? And now what we're going to do is, this is a preset one, so we're going to go ahead and or left-click rather. So right here with this arrow, this is an output, okay? And these are our axis values that it's going to pull off of our mouse. When it goes and finds our mouse, it'll say, oh, okay, this is the direction you're facing. So we're going to pull off of here, left mouse click and drag, and type in add yaw, okay? And we want add controller yaw input. That's that one right there, okay? Another way to get to that little menu is if you right click right here, and you can type in add controller yaw input, and it should pop up. And then we're going to take our axis value and we're going to connect that together. Look at that, we made our first blueprints. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select those. So if I left click and drag, I can select them all. I'm going to hit C on my keyboard. We get this comment feature, and we're going to call this mouse direction input. Okay, and we can also change the colors. I'm going to make this one green. I'm not really sure if there's a standard color convention or not for inputs, but I'm going to make mine green. I tend to usually make my inputs green. For motion, and then red for things like stopping and stuff like that. So anyway, that's our first one. So I'm going to go ahead and right mouse click, drag, kind of put it up at the top a little bit here. And then now we're going to get our move forwards and backwards. So I'm going to right click, type in move forward, backwards. Again, we want the one with the big arrow pointing at it. That's that one right there. Now, this one's going to be a little bit more to it because there's some stuff we have to go and get to find out which direction our camera is facing and how we're going to apply this movement. And the reason we're doing it this way is because we're going to be adding what's called torque to the sphere to get it to rotate. We could get this to move different ways, but then it would just kind of float across the ground, and we don't want it to float. This isn't a floating character. This is a ball that's supposed to rotate. It's going to add some degree of difficulty and challenge to the player, okay? Now, we've got this sitting out here, but there's a few things we need to make this work, okay? One of them is we're going to want to control the way the acceleration happens. And I think as we move forward, we'll talk about some of these variables and how to add variables. So let's go ahead and just jump on in, all right? So sitting here, we've got, the next thing we want to do is we want to know which direction our camera is facing so we can add that input, right? So I'm going to click and drag the camera down from here. So click this camera, drag it down here, and that'll work, okay? And now what I want to get is, I want to get the forward vector of this camera. So get forward vector, okay? And that's going to get the forward movement, but I also need to get the right vector, okay? And when we think about vectors, the reason why we're getting forward and right is because you also have the opposite of forward, which is reverse, and you also have the opposite of right, which is left, okay? And these will be fed into it in the positive or negative inputs. All right, so now with that, what I'm going to do is this whole thing is going to feed into an output. So we're going to take this output and to feed into the input, and what we're going to do is we're going to add torque. Remember, I keep talking about torque. That's the thing that creates this rotation, and we're going to do it in radians, okay? Degrees might work. I really haven't played with it, but I know radians does work. So we're going to select that, and notice that it automatically pulled the player up for me because that's where the target is. And we're going to take the output from here, this return value, and we're going to multiply. So if you hold down the shift button and the number 8, you should get multiply. You can also type in multiply, and we get this input. Now we're going to multiply the forward vector by 0, okay? Because we don't really want to have any input from the forward, because that's going to kind of cause us to spin in a kind of a funny way, and we don't want that to happen. What we're really going to do is we're going to get, we want this one right here. Now we need a forward vector because we're applying a forward vector to this, so we don't want to totally minimize it. We're going to apply a forward vector in a direction that we're facing from the right vector, okay? All right, so now I'm going to pull out of here, and I'm also going to get another multiply. We can do the same thing, or we can also select this one, and I can hit Control D to duplicate it, and it's going to give me a duplication, okay? I'll pull this in here. Now, one of the things that's missing here is a way to actually take into consideration the amount of input we're giving it. So how fast should we actually apply this torque? How much pressure or power should be given to it? So this is going to be our first variable. We're going to come down here and we're going to hit the plus button, and I'm going to type in acceleration multiplier. Hopefully I'm spelling these correctly. It's not much of a spelling check, but nothing like spelling in public, right? Okay, and then right here where it says Boolean, it's actually Boolean. We're going to click down here and we're going to select float from that. So if you hover over it, select it, you'll get a float. You can also change it over here. See in the details, this is all the information about this one. Now, right down here we need to put a value in, but it says please compile the blueprint. So we can't put a value in until we compile it. All right, now for our acceleration multiplier, this is something that you can play around with to get a number that you like. But for what I was doing in the video that I demonstrated it early on, I typed in 40 for my multiplier. And now what we're going to do is we're going to click on the name, we're going to drag it and drop it, and we're going to select get. Okay, we're going to get the acceleration multiplier. And what we need to do is we need to take the acceleration multiplier. I'm going to pull this back just a little bit, kind of clean things up a little bit, because we need to actually multiply the acceleration multiplier times the axis value that we're getting right here, so we can increase the amount of input. Okay, so I'm going to just pull off of here, and again I'm going to Control 8, or I'm sorry, Shift 8, my bad, hit the multiply button. Whew. All right, and then I'm going to multiply this in here, so we're multiplying these two together. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take that and we're going to multiply it times the right vector. So we pull out from here, and oh, come on, hover over it. There we go. And what it did is it automatically modified this from being a float so that it can feed in as an integer, okay? or a vector, I'm sorry, as a vector. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to take these two and we're going to add them together. So again, whichever one you select first is the one that will be the top one. So I'm going to select the top one there, hold the shift equals button to get the plus for add. You can also type in add. I'm going to add these two together. And then this is what we're going to actually be our input to our torque for radians, okay? Now, there's one other thing we need to control as well, okay? We're going to set all this, but we also want to be able to set kind of a limit for top speed. Okay, we don't want our player to just continually accelerate until they're going so fast that they bust through obstacles and everything else and just kind of go flying through the world. So we're going to set a linear dampening onto this. So if we pull out from this output, okay, and then we're going to go ahead and type in set linear. There it is, set linear dampening. And this is going to be for the player, but we already have a player 1 out there. So I'm just going to go ahead and select the player 1 anyway. And what we're going to do is we can either leave it like this, or to clean things up, we can delete this player 1 here and drag this player 1 to here. Kind of clean that up. If you double click anywhere onto here, you get this little modifier so you can kind of adjust the way it goes, kind of so you can see and follow the lines. That's kind of how I like it. Now we could hard code in our dampening here, but we can also, I prefer setting up as variables as many times as possible because you know where to go and find your dampening. This way, if we use it for other things, we can use that same variable. And we also have one location where we can go and find all of our settings. So we did that for acceleration multiplier. We're going to go ahead and click it again, and we're going to type in dampening, dampening, something like that. I think it's actually damping. Yeah, there we go. All right. And for this one, again, we need to compile to be able to get to the variables. And our dampening variable, I set this pretty low to 0.1. And again, these are all numbers that you can come back in and you can modify later on. And in fact, the acceleration multiplier and dampening are something that we can even turn on and adjust inside of our details for our player up in the level. So I'm going to click there and turn these little eyeballs on so we can see them. I'm going to compile them. We can always come back and turn them off later on, but this makes it so that you can see them outside and they have access to modify them. Okay. All right, so there we go. We've got this one set up. Okay. Now what we want to do is, again, highlight this whole thing right here. I missed part of it. Okay, hit C again to comment. You can grab and drag it over a little bit, line it up. And I'm going to make the color green. And then for my comment section up here, oops, okay. For the comment section up here, we're going to call this, what did I call it? We're going to call it movement forward. All right, why aren't you working up here? Come on. There we go. All right, so we know this is movement forward. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that we can stop, okay? And this is the last piece of this blueprint. And this video may run just a tad long. I apologize, but the reason why we're going to do that is just so we can get it into the game so you can kind of play around with it. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add our stopping ability, okay? So I'm going to right click again, and this time I'm just going to type in stop. Oops, stop, oh, no. And there's a lot of different stop ones in here, but this is an input action events. This was the one we created. I just want to double check. Yeah, that should be it. Okay, and that is it right there. Okay, and you can see the difference between this one and the other ones is this one is reaction to a button being pressed, whereas this one is a button being pushed and held, okay? So we're pressing and we're releasing. Okay. So what this is going to do is set it up so that we're going to adjust our dampening at some points, which is going to help us stop, and then we're going to then reset our dampening. So this is going to be a little bit of a confusing one, but I think we'll get through it somehow. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add another variable, okay, and we're going to call this stopping factor. If I can type here, we'd be dangerous. Okay, stopping factor, and we're going to have to compile it again, and we're going to give it a value of 5. Okay, and these are all variables that we can come back and fine tune if you want to. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out our dampening, pull this out, okay, set it somewhere around here, we're going to get it. And then we're also going to pull out our stopping factor. Okay, nope, wrong one, we want get, not set. Okay, and we got both of these together, and we're going to add them together. Okay, so again, shift plus to get your add, and then we got the add, we're going to put them together. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're also going to pull out dampening, and we're going to want to set it. So we're going to set dampening. Okay, so when this button is pressed, we're going to set our dampening. And this is going to be the amount that we set it to, okay? And then we're going to set angular dampening. Okay, for the player. Set angular dampening for the player. I'm going to grab this player one here, and I'm going to drag it down here. Okay, now we've got that set up. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is when we release this, okay, we're also going to set, sorry about that, we're going to also set dampening. So we're just going to pull this back out here, we're going to do another set dampening. We're going to drag the released out here, there we go, now we're going the right direction. Okay, and then we're going to take our dampening, get dampening, and we're going to take our stopping factor, and we're going to get our stopping factor, but this time we're going to subtract that amount. Okay, so we're going to do a subtraction. Okay, hit the little minus button on the keyboard, which is next to the equals button. Okay, we're going to subtract that, set that there. Okay, and then we're also going to set angular dampening again. So I'm going to take this one, okay, and I'm going to duplicate it, Control D to duplicate it. The input target is going to be the player. The output to the input is this, okay, and then in dampening, for some reason, I think I might have been playing around with it, but we'll try this. We're going to put 5 in there. We're going to leave 0 down here, okay? All right. Now we're going to go ahead and compile this. We're going to save it. Actually, I'm going to highlight it one more time. Hit C. We're going to call this stopping. I'm going to change the color to red. Say OK. All right, and we're going to compile, save all of this. Now the next thing we need to do, we're going to test out our player, but first we have to make it so we have a place for our player to show up. Okay, so we're going to click back into our main level here. We're going to go to Place Actors, and we're going to go to Recently Placed. That's not the one we want. Let's see here, All Classes. Oh, you know what, I'm just not finding it in there. Maybe Basic. Oh, there we go. Click on Basic. And click on Basic, we're going to pull a player start out to here. Okay, and that's going to be our player start. Now the next thing we need to do is, besides hit save, is go down here to our content drawer and go back up to our blueprints. We're going to right click, we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call this one Game Mode. Okay. And we're going to double click in Game Mode. we're going to right click. We're going to go to Blueprint Class. And down here, we're going to, actually, it's already here. We're going to select Game Mode Base. Okay, and we're just going to call this BP My Game Mode. All right, so now with that, the next thing we need to do is save everything. We need to go up to Windows up here. So at the very top where it says Window, click Window. And we want to find our world settings right here. We can also do this in project settings, and that would make it so that it would always be this. And we may go back and do that, but for right now, we're going to just do it right here. So with this open, world settings, we find game mode override, and it says none. So if I click the down arrow, I can find my game mode. So BP my game mode right there. That was the one we just created. And then underneath this is a little arrow. We got to hit that arrow. And the default pawn class, we're going to change that to BP my player. All right. So now if we hit play, our player should show up. And there's something very basic we forgot to do, or I forgot to do. We can move around. We got some functionality. Let's go ahead and hit escape. And if you're like me, you're getting all these errors. It says simulate physics is enabled. Would you like to add, if you'd like to add torque? So yes, we need to do that. So let's go back in and go to BP my player. Okay. And if we select the player here, okay, our player is movable. And we need to scroll down here and we need to simulate physics. Okay, and that should make this a physics actor right there. Okay, gravity should be enabled. And that should be everything. Let's see how this works. Compile, and we're going to save it. We can go back in, hit play. Well, that's so good. It looks like gravity happened. Click in the scene, and we're not getting any torque. Okay, I don't get any errors to tell me what I messed up on, so let me pause this real quick and figure this out real quick. I forgot something. Alright, so it's always the little tiny things when you're making these videos. Sometimes you just miss it. Right here where it says accelerate change on our movement forward, we've got to put a little checkbox right there and say yes, accelerate change. I'm going to compile it, save it again, go back to File, Save All, go to Level 1. Now if we hit play, our character should appear, and we should be able to move forward, and then hold the space bar to stop. We may need to play around with those numbers a little bit. Okay, and then you can face different directions, test it out, see if you can turn. All right, so looks like we've got some success there. We've got our player in. It's got a blueprint so we can move. There's more functionality we're going to add to the player as well. But for right now, that is it for this video. I apologize it went over 20 minutes. I think we're almost at 25 minutes. Hopefully this is a rarity and we can get more things done. But I really wanted to get that player in there so you can start trying them out and seeing how it works. All right, so thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like what you saw, and I'll see you next time.